that. Oh, and we're live, just like that. I won't even. Hey, everyone, and welcome to SVT time. I'm Dino Monoxilus. I've got my wonderful co-host here, Mr. Dom Liberati. And joining us today is, I can't think of a perfect adjective, but I'm going to say just a dear friend, an absolute perfect gentleman, amazing bass player, Mr. Phil Soussan is with us here today. Hey, Phil.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
I feel very honored to be here, and you know, to have anything to do with Ampeg has always been something that I would strive for when I was a young budding bass player and just starting out. I mean, you know, this was like the backdrop to every great bass player that I used to admire, and so this is really a fantastic honor. Thank you so much.
Oh man, thank you. Yeah, thanks for coming on. And you know, you've had a long storied career with Ampeg. Mm-hmm. So just real quick, what in lieu of everything that's going on in the world, and I know I usually open up these SVT times with this, but just like a quick catch up, what are you doing to keep busy in these COVID times? Well,
I did something really unique that no one else has done, and I wanted to share that with you. I decided to grow a beard.
And I must say, it looks very good on you.
I've saved a fortune in razor blades. Nobody's judgmental about it. It's great. Yeah. It's just an excuse to just basically look like a slob. Well, no, I'm not looking like a slob. I'm trying to sort of keep it.
What are you trying to say? And actually, I did something different, and people kind of scorned me for it. I shaved my beard off.
You did?
Yeah.
You did a lousy job of it, Dino, because it's still there.
Well, I grew it back because everybody was like, that doesn't look anything like you. Like, you don't look like the scruffy old man that you actually are. So grow your beard back.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had all kinds of comments. I mean, people say I look sophisticated. Some people, how little they know. I mean, my God. Well, Dom, you got a good sort of fashion thing going, right?
3-4 days.
Yeah.
That's 3-4 days.
But I took a razor elsewhere, so
yeah. We don't know. We don't know about we don't need to know about your manscaping.
This is what this is about. Oh, okay.
Actually, Dom, you're broadcasting from a very special place today too.
Yes, we are something super secret, but people will know about very soon. A Backstage. I think I can share where we're at the Troubadour in LA, and technically West Hollywood. So this is the glorious Backstage, much like many Backstage areas and clubs. This is you got your distressed wall, you know.
Now, why do they call it a green room when the rooms are never actually green? That's my question. You've probably been in more green rooms than any of us.
Yeah,
maybe because people get nervous and then they want to throw up.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know.
Yeah. Do you have a fairly PC, not completely PC, but like a good Troubadour story or memory?
Me?
Yeah.
I mean, I've played the Troubadour many times. I've done jams there, I've done shows there, but I think one of the most memorable times was when I was actually vice president of the Grammys. And during that time, we did a project, which was a grassroots project to raise money for the benefit of musicians who found themselves on hard times. It's part of Music Cares, is what it was, and we raised money for musicians. And so we organized a grassroots concert there, and I put a band together, which became known as Carnival of Dogs. It lived for a very, very short period of time, but I did it with who was in the band? Tracy Guns, Matt Sorum, myself, and Frankie Perez, and we did a show that was sold out, and it was just terrific. It was really great. John Waite came up and sang some songs with us, and it was that was the last and most memorable cathartic thing that I did, and we did it at the Troubadour. So it was That was cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, I did read up about you being vice president of the Grammys, and I was thinking, man, like, thank God we have a bassist out there, like, as an ambassador, proving to the world that this archetype of the simple, bassist we can do stuff. we can command stuff.
We do stuff. I mean, bass players, I think, do a lot of stuff. I mean, just the very nature of playing the bass, I think, is you get a real overview of what happens in the band when it comes down to arrangement.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why a lot of bass players or a lot of bass players become, or a lot of producers have been bass players. You can write down quite a shopping list of bass player producers. And I think it's something that goes with the territory. You are trying to join together what's happening rhythmically, what's happening melodically. You have an absolute relationship with the melody line, with the vocal line, more so than any other instrument. That's why I think you have such great sensibility in bass player singers. Whether it's Sting or whether it's Geddy Lee or whether it's Paul McCartney or whoever else. There is a bond between these two things, and as such, you're positioned in such a way as to having a great understanding of arrangement, of how instruments interact and how these relationships come together. And I think that extends into your professional, your personal life as well.
Yeah.
So, bass players tend to be, I don't want to sound, this is going to get a lot of whatever, but we tend to be social people. We like to sort of bring people together, and just that maybe that's part, derived from the same thing. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out.
I think there's definitely something there. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know Dom's an accomplished producer as well. He's done a lot of things too. So yeah, it just seems like bass players kind of have, and let's face it, we're the most sensible ones out of the entire group. So we kind of.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All the musician jokes. I mean, there's drummer jokes, there's singer jokes, there's guitar player jokes, but we write them. Right.
Exactly.
That's it.
And who do all the other band members go to when they have a problem in the band? They come to us. It's it's like we're the sensible ones. I don't know.
For the therapist.
Yeah.
How long did you serve as vice president, Phil?
I did 2 terms as vice president, which was the maximum that I could do. But then I was on the board for, I think, 8 years.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, prior to that, I was chairman of the Advocacy Committee. I became very interested in that. I initially got involved with them because of the assistance that the Music Cares gave to my dear late friend, Randy Castillo. And they really came through for him. And I thought it would be worthwhile to try to give back that way to the community. So I got myself on the ballot and became elected to a board governor. And from there, I became chairman of Advocacy. Once I got on the board, I realized that the Grammys does an awful lot of stuff. And the least interesting thing to me was the awards show. But we do archiving preservation, we do Music Cares, we do advocacy, we do all kinds of things. And advocacy is just something that spoke to me, and I found myself going to DC several times, lobbying senators and House representatives. I got to learn a little bit about that process as well. It's remarkable.
That's an interesting point, because a lot of people think of the Grammys as just this one television show where people get trophies and awards, but it does so much more for the industry rather than just hand out awards. And that, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah. How does somebody like myself or somebody that's watching this become more involved in something like that, if they wanted to be more involved in the process or more involved in the Grammys or NARAS for that matter?
Well, they go, that's what it's the same. It's synonymous. It's the same organization, NARAS, the Recording Academy, the Grammys, whatever. I mean, you can go to the website, you can sign up. If you are an artist and you've had a certain amount of successes in your songs, you will find yourself in a position where you can vote. Okay. There are not that many voting members. I think it's about 12,500 or 13,000 voting members.
Okay.
And they're the ones that vote on everything. So, and you can also become much more involved in seeing what's going on. We live in a technologically advancing environment. It changes day by day. And, it's up to people to claim that territory. As you know, if I talked to you 10 years ago, 12 years ago about streaming, you wouldn't understand what I was talking about. Yet streaming has become such a huge, important method of distributing music or anything for that matter. And there are rights, and people have to jump up and have to claim those rights. Otherwise, other people will take them away. You know, so you have to have a unified voice from the music community that says, look, we want to stake claim to our royalties. We have to be able to find some way to participate in those royalties as they're collected, even though they may not be being collected right now. But somewhere down the road, you have to establish that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, somebody else will.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's very important.
Yeah.
Yep. No, absolutely.
So I was very involved in the Performance Rights Act. I don't want to turn this into a whole advocacy meeting.
No, this is interesting.
Yeah, the Performance Rights Act, which was for a long time terrestrial radio has paid very respectable royalties to musicians, but other platforms did not. And terrestrial radio has been fighting us for a long time. The NAB wants to pay less, and we seem to think that's not warranted. I mean, they make a lot of money out of advertising. So, look, it's a constant debate back and forth. The Performance Rights Act was to do with American musicians not getting performance money. So if I cover a McCartney song and it gets on the radio, McCartney makes money. I don't make anything as an artist, nothing. The rest of the world, I would. In the United States, I don't. So this is something that we were trying to work on. And it was somehow encompassed a part of the Music Modernization Act, which I'm glad to say that President Trump passed. And we'd been trying to pass it for years. And everybody kind of gave it lip service. He actually passed it, which was a big deal. So you can look up the Music Modernization Act. It's very, very good. And other things, white spaces. We were involved in the discussion about the airline rules about allowing musicians to take guitars into a cabin on an aircraft.
Yep.
And now they can't turn you away. You have to be allowed to take your instrument inside. And, you know, we used to have to deal with that already stressful flying experience being made even more stressful by, now I've got to get into a confrontation, an adversarial confrontation with the gate staff.
Yeah.
And by the way, for your listeners and for your viewers, it's not up to the gate staff. It's up to the plane's flight crew. They have the ultimate decision. So if you ever get a problem, just say, okay, I respect, I understand. Let me please ask the flight crew. And they have to allow you to do that. And the flight crew knows the rule that they're supposed to find you somewhere to put your instrument.
I had an opposite problem once where they were so excited that I had an instrument on board that they were like, yeah, we'll put it in the cockpit. It's totally fine. And this is the head flight attendant in front of everyone was just like, we just need to open it up and show everyone that it's not a bomb. And he actually said those words on the plane. And he opened my case in front of everyone, which, if you're not, I don't know, if you're completely out of the music world, you could potentially look at my case as like a gun case, even though you know that's not getting through the airport security. But it was I was so nervous. It was just like a weird moment. But yeah, my bass has flown cockpit before.
Yeah, I used to take a Steinberger around. I have it right here. This here. This is one of the original Steinbergers. You remember these ones?
Nice. Yeah.
And this one was a gift. This was given to me by Buzz Burrell, the late Buzz Burrell, because I got to know him. And he had a couple of these, but you'll notice that this one's fretted. And Buzz used to play fretless all the time. So he'd say to me, I'm not going to play this. Why don't you have it? So I've had this for years. It's a very early one. I think the serial number is in the 100 or something. But it came with a case. And today, if I took that case into an airport, I'd be arrested on sight because it looks like a gun case, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
you almost have to put it in a real guitar case, in a full-size guitar case, so that people would identify it as a guitar instead of
stand back or I'll play some riffs.
Yeah. I've actually had instances where they've taken my bass on the plane, but they wouldn't allow me on the plane.
And I understand that. Yes, your bass. We'll take that. You cannot know.
It'll be there when you get there. Don't worry about it.
Or it might not.
That's interesting, though. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I remember you and I have talked about that in the past, about carrying instruments on planes and our rights as musicians to be able to. I've actually used that quite a few times since you had mentioned that to me. Whenever you run into a situation like that, you just very politely ask, "Can I talk to the staff on the flight, or somebody on the flight that I can talk to?" And 99% of the time they're like, "If we have space and we can put it up, we'll find a spot for you somewhere on the plane."
It's really not that difficult.
You always attract more bees with honey than you do with vinegar, in my opinion.
Bear in mind that this is FAA rules, so this does not apply in outside of the US necessarily. I mean, generally people are pretty cool. I mean, I've had Aeroflot people being really nice to me as well, stuff like that. So the only airline that deserves a shout out for not being accommodating whatsoever is British Airways. They absolutely they will forbid you from bringing an instrument on the plane or checking it unless it's in a full flight case, and you can be stranded in an airport and they don't give a damn.
Yeah.
So I try not to fly British Airways.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Tell us something. So, obviously your career has spanned so many great artists and rock artists and pop artists and you're still going, obviously. I mean, you're still touring, you're still recording and playing, but just what's that?
No, I'm not. I'm not touring at the moment.
Well, no, you're not. Of course not. But just where did you start? How did you get into this crazy business as a bass player?
Well, I started, of course. I played instruments ever since I was a kid. Since I was maybe 2 years old, 3 years old, I started banging around with instruments. And I had my mom had a couple of cousins who lived in Paris, who were musicians. They very accomplished musicians. And they were supportive. They bought me my first guitar. As far as playing, I mean, I was in a completely different direction. I was actually heading towards pre-med, believe it or not. And so that was something I was very interested in, very passionate about. I made it my business to learn about stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And that was considered to be the direction I was going. But there was always this music thing that was going on. And I started to find myself more drawn to the music than to my studies. My studies I was able to do breeze through. It was like, okay, I got to do this homework. Done. And it was good. Yeah. I got that out the way so that I could sit down and I could play music. And that's what, playing records, listening to records, listening to the Beatles, listening to this, listening to the stuff that my mom used to play all around the house. And I guess the pivotal moment was watching David Bowie performed Starman in 1972 on Top of the Pops. And I looked and said, that's really what I want to do.
Wow.
So that was that. And then I went off and started listening to all of these other influential people. Bass players was McCartney and absolutely Andy Fraser.
Yeah.
From Free. And here's another show and tell thing here.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is what started me wanting to play the bass was with these instruments, these EBOs.
Yeah.
Which Andy Fraser had an EB3, right? This is a 63 EBO, and I bought this probably in this, I don't know when it was, long time ago.
Okay.
But there was a sound.
Yeah.
There was a sound to these things, and it was just like, wow, that's what I was drawn to. Now I played the violin as well. I played classical music from the age of 11 till I was about 21, and took it to a very high level, to grade 8 standard. And so there was already a connection for me for the violin and the bass as from that point of view, from that perspective. But I just started listening to bass players. I was just drawn to bass players. I mean, I played guitar. I still play guitar.
What do you consider your first instrument? Like first as in timeline of like the first thing that you're like, okay, I play this now. I'm like the person that was it violin or?
It would have to be violin, yeah. I mean, I played instruments before, violin and then guitar shortly after. I didn't start playing bass until I was probably about 14, 15, 16, something like that.
Yeah. And your mom was supportive when, obviously if it wasn't for David Bowie, we might be talking to Dr. Soussan right now, right?
Dr. Bill.
Well, I'd have the Wheel of Fortune that we were talking about. That's an inside joke.
Inside joke.
But no, I the supportive, I don't know. I mean, it was the second hardest decision, I think, was to decide to, at a certain point, divert and play music, because I couldn't do both at the same time anymore. So that was the second hardest decision, was to decide to go. The first hardest decision being to tell my parents that I'd made the second hardest decision, because they weren't too thrilled about that.
Yeah. You know, can I tell the story now? How we first met? Speaking of,
sure, go ahead.
So just very, very quick story. Years ago, when I was living in LA, me and some mutual friends of mine and Phil's, Tim Bogert, Ray Brinker, I think Ash Crofts from Seals and Crofts was on that. Right? Anyways, long story short, we used to meet on Sunday mornings at different people's houses to have breakfast before we'd go on our motorcycle ride, and everybody was invited. Well, this one morning, it was my turn to host breakfast, and my wife, everybody came over to our house, and Phil showed up on his Harley with his mom on the back, who was visiting from the UK. Okay. Which I was like, that to me was, first of all, obviously I knew Phil from his work with Ozzy and Billy Idol. I'm like, freaking Phil Soussan's here. Like, I'm going around with Phil today, and his mom's on the back. My wife comes. Anyways, so we part ways that day. I don't know, what was it, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, Phil? Maybe a little bit longer than that. You reach out to me, because you wanted to find out who was handling artist relations for Ampeg. We talked, and I remember saying, I says, do you remember years ago, back in the early 90s, this instance where you went motorcycle riding with your mom and you went over this guy's house, and Phil was like, I do remember that. In fact, my mom still actually kind of talks about that. I was like, that was me back then. So, like 20 years later, we kind of reunited after this, and it was just, I just thought it was an interesting story how the universe just kind of reunites people back in touch with one another.
Yeah, my mom is very my wife calls her the queen, because she's very proper, and she's very much like that. And one of the characters we happened to run into on that ride was, I've never heard so many uses of the F word in my life, and every other word was the F word, and I was just, I never swore in front of my parents. I would always keep it clean. I was very respectful in that way. Keep my swearing for everyone else, but I was just sitting there, just nodding my head, going. And then finally, my mom looks around at me. She goes, "I want a chap." And I said, "Yes." "He's very colourful, isn't he?" I remember saying that.
That is, I can't even think of a better word than that. That is very colorful. That is awesome.
But what's quite funny about that, Dino, was I contacted you because I wanted to find out who was heading artist relations to reestablish a relationship, because I had been with them, and you said to me, "Oh no, you're still on our books."
Yeah,
you've been on there since 1989. And, I had no idea, right?
Right.
So that was the funny thing, because I think I came on through Ken Hensley when he was at Troubadour Music, and that's when I first started. Became an Ampeg artist. I was working with Ken purely randomly on a Wasp album. We were both working on this Wasp album called the Crimson Idol or something.
Okay.
And I ended up doing all the pre-production on it and everything with him. And so that's when I became an Ampeg artist. And then I didn't realize I still was.
Yeah. I tell people, once you're an Ampeg artist, you're always an Ampeg artist. Like this is like Hotel California. Yeah. I will hunt you down.
Well, it could be worse things. I mean,
Right.
So what was your first Ampeg experience? Was it on an SVT, or was it a different piece of gear?
My first Ampeg experience, there was my first Ampeg experience, I think, was I was in a band and we were opening up the Michael Schenker group years and years ago during a British tour, and our gear hadn't showed up. The truck had broken down, and Michael was a great guy, and he said, we said, "Oh, we can't do the show." "Why not?" "Why not? Why can't you not do the show?" "Well, because our truck broke down." And he goes, "Well, we don't have any gear." And he said, "Well, what's wrong with our gear?" And we said, "Nothing, but yes, you use our gear." "Oh, okay." So we went up there and we used their backline. I mean, who else would do that?
Yeah.
And Chris Glenn, who was playing bass with Michael, came up to me and said, "Let me show you how this works. You plug this into here, and you turn the harmonics around." And I'm okay. And I plugged it, and I played this note, and all of a sudden it was like, "Oh, wow, what is that?" And he had a wall of Ampegs behind, and they were all on.
That's awesome.
That was the moment I went, "Wow, there's something going on here."
Yeah.
I mean, this is. I keep telling everybody, Ampeg brings the thunder. That's my own quote, but welcome to use it. But that was where I felt the thunder. I mean, it was just, there was no sound like that in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially now, did you tour with multiple rigs after that? Like, huge backlines, or?
Yeah, I did. When I went to work with Ozzy, I mean, I used different amps. I used acoustic amps with one of my bands, and then when I started working with Ozzy, I ended up using some Marshall Professional. They made some bass gear that I don't think was ever really imported into the United States, but they had these rack mount 900s, and I had, I think, 5 of them. They were bi-amps, and I used them, and I loved the way they sounded. They were really great. After that point, I then switched. I went back to Ampeg again. When I moved to the United States, I didn't have any of that Marshall equipment, and I went back to that great sound that I heard. And it would change as well, not always. I mean, I used Ampeg when I was working with Billy Idol, and that was after Ozzy. And then there was a time in the 90s when I went for 5 years to work in France with Johnny Halliday. And when I was there, I actually ended up using some Marshall equipment. They had this new series called the Marshall 3000 series. Do you remember that stuff?
Vaguely, yeah.
They were 3 kilowatt heads. It was enormous. 2 15 cabs and 4x12 cabs on top. 2 of those. And I would run them. They looked huge, but I would run them at about 1. And there was just a great sound that sort of spread all over the stage. It was good, but it wasn't, the type of music I was playing with Johnny was very varied, because his music had been hits. This is a guy who had hits since he was 15 years old. So every decade he had hits that morphed according to the styles of those decades. So we had such a versatile and different kind of repertoire, a 3-hour set that would go between 60s songs and 70s or 50s songs even. So, it was much less concerned with me having my own sound, and more concerned with me trying to sort of have something that was fairly nondescript and being able to be adapted in. When I came back to me wanting to have my signature sound, it's always Ampeg. Yeah. So since that time, since I got back with Johnny, I mean, so late 90s, I've been exclusively just using Ampeg the whole time.
Yep. Yeah. And you used Ampeg, like you said, you used Ampeg through the Billy Idol days as well. Yeah. What was it like working with Billy? He seems like just a very genuine dude in terms of, like, he's the real deal, obviously.
Yeah, we had a great time. We had a great time working together. It sort of ended at a certain point through a lot of external things, and I really don't have too much to do with music.
Yeah.
But there's some situations that didn't bode well, and we ended up parting ways. But I love Billy, and I see him from time to time. He's always great. He's a very, very intelligent, very smart guy, and he has an incredible charisma. There's no doubt about it. And working with him, I think when we first started working together, it was great. We would get up very early in the morning, and I'd go to his house. He'd be working out with his trainer, and right after that, we'd sit down and start messing around with ideas. The whole thing came to pass because we found ourselves purely as a fluke, by chance. Randy Castillo and myself went to Tahiti on a vacation. It's a long story, but he happened to be on the plane. Billy was on the same plane. And then when we landed, he was at the same hotel. And then we weren't staying at that hotel. We were going to another island, and we went to this other island, and he ended up on that island. It's like, what's going on here? And we ended up becoming very good friends. And And that was when he shared the idea that he wanted to get a new band. He was still living in New York. I was living in LA. I said, why don't you come out to LA and spend some time, see if you like it there. And he ended up moving there. And we rode bikes as well. We had bikes in common. So that brought us together. Nobody had bikes back then, but I've been riding since I was 15, and we quickly got Harleys, and there was very few people had Harleys. Back then in LA, if you were riding around on a Harley and you saw another Harley coming the other way, you go, oh, stop, turn around, because you've got to ride with them.
Yeah. Right.
Nobody to ride with,
Yeah.
So you didn't care where they were going, but so we formed our own little kind of exclusive British bikers club, Ian Astbury and Billy Duffy and from the Cult, and
oh wow,
and Billy and Idol and a whole bunch. We soon numbered about 10 or 12 people, and we'd go out every Sunday and ride around, and there was a lot of that was going on. But as far as the work went, and as far as working, Billy's a great guy at, you play him something and he puts his stamp on it, and he'll find something to sing on it, he'll find something to do, and he's really good at that stuff.
Yeah,
really, really good at that. He used to tell me that his goal was to write a song just on one chord. If he can carry a song with just one chord. I only know like one song, and that's probably Bodhisattva by Steely Dan. That's probably the only song I know that is written on one chord.
right.
But To Be a Lover was on two chords, right? So that really puts a lot of onus of responsibility on your vocal line, on your lyrics, on your delivery, and that's what he's all about.
That's cool.
That's what he's all about.
Yeah,
it's a real eye opener for me to see how you could work that way.
Yeah. That like I said, I don't know much about him other than what we've seen publicly facing, but he always came across as he's this rock and roll icon for one thing.
Get rid of that.
Somebody's calling.
That's him.
Not anymore.
They're calling about your car warranty, Phil.
My car warranty, yeah.
My
refrigerator part supply company.
Right. So, man, like I said, you've had such a storied career. You also worked with Jimmy Page for a while as well. What was that like?
Oh my gosh! I mean, that for me was like a dream come true, because the 1969 or 1970, I think I bought Led Zeppelin 1. When it came out, I'd heard that and I was blown away by the album. And I was really young. But very interested in music. And, I have an autobiography that's going to be coming out soon. It's actually finished. I'm just going through rereads at the moment. But I talk quite extensively about that back in the day when we were kids. We
lost him. That's why the people were calling on the phone. And just like that.
Yeah.
This is like when, we lose input from other. Oh, there we are. Hey.
We're back. That was So we get these things called, it was like a gift card, and it was a token which had a value. It was a gift card with a value, and you could spend it in any record store. So, you'd gather these things up, and you'd go into a record store, and then you'd spend hours and hours looking through all of the albums and the vinyl albums. You'd find things that you'd want to buy, and then you'd buy them and you'd bring them home. It was a really great experience that sadly doesn't exist anymore. And so, Zeppelin was a huge, I was a big Zeppelin fan. And so I'd always dreamed that at some point, I might meet Jimmy Page, let alone work with him. And I ended up in a band called Wildlife that was Simon Kirk's band on Swan Song. We were on Swan Song Records. We were managed by Peter Grant. And that's how I got to know the Swan Song people. And purely through that, I got in touch with a gentleman by the name of Phil Carlo, who was Zeppelin's tour manager in the latter years. He was looking after Jimmy, and he called me up and said, Jimmy would like to put something together, would like to start working again. He hasn't worked since Zeppelin's demise. And he knows that you're a fan of his. Would you be wanting to get together and have some jams, do some playing? And I said, of course. So we ended up for a few months just rehearsing, just going into rehearsals, and it was just really getting Jimmy back in. He wanted to get back into the swing of playing, into the swing of what he loved doing, and we were there along for the ride. Eventually, that band would turn into the Firm.
Okay.
And I would have stayed were it not for the fact that I got offered the Ozzy gig, and I had a dilemma. I had a terribly difficult decision to make. Do I want to leave the guy who really I've always dreamed about working with? Do I want to come and join Ozzy, who's one of the biggest artists in the world, who's ready to start touring on a new project right now?
Yeah.
And it was a problem that I'm sure most people would be very envious to have. And I was certainly very humbled by it. And I didn't know what to do, so I asked Jimmy, and I said, hey, what do you think? And he basically said, look, I think it comes down to, if you want to go out right now and start working, then you should do that, because I'm not probably going to do anything here for a while. It's going to take a while. And so I decided to make that decision, and I went off and I did that, but I stayed friends with Jimmy to the present day. I haven't seen him recently, but we stayed in touch for a long, long time.
Wow.
What a great experience, though. I mean, to me, it was just seeing how he related to things, the backgrounds that he had. He had a big connection with your Scotty Moore type guitar players. I mean, and I had a big connection to 50s Americana music as well. I was a big fan of Bill Black and a lot of rockabilly stuff, and so we connected on that.
That's cool.
And I would see how he would arrange things and how he would think of things as well. He had a very great, slightly alternative way of thinking of riffs. He would think in off times a lot of the time. I think that's evident to anyone who listens to Zeppelin, but to start thinking of riffs starting on a different beat, for example, turns things around, and we do a lot of that kind of stuff. It was very, very cool. I just got a little window of insight into a great mind.
Yeah. I would imagine like that, working, you hear stories about guys that have worked with, Miles Davis, and they come out of it like it was an amazing education. And I would imagine it would be kind of the same thing working with, the great Jimmy Page, something like that. Just the education that you garner from it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Knowledge.
Yeah. We got to, it was almost like a discovery period. I mean, I remember from my biology studies, there was a theory that Darwin came up with, and I can't remember what it's called, but the theory is that when an embryo is created, it actually goes through all of the evolutionary stages in 9 months. So it goes through being everything from a fish to being a single-celled organism. You can trace evolution through the development of an embryo, and there's a statement. It's a theory, and in a similar kind of way, when you spent time with someone like Jimmy, you'd see how all of his influences that he'd had would combine into something that became so signature and unique.
Yeah.
And I got a little bit of an insight into where all of those little pieces fit. I don't know if this is a little kind
No.
You really see how all the pieces came together in the puzzle. And I obviously I couldn't do that, but I just got a little bit of an insight into it.
Yeah.
And to me, it was just amazing. And he's just a wonderful guy.
That is
favorite people on the planet.
That is so cool.
I wanted to bring up, because we had a question pop up.
Yeah.
That was actually a really good question. Yeah, it's like asking who's the rock star you had most fun with, and who was the most reserved to work with. Most fun, I know, is it's tricky. Because I wanted to say we didn't have fun with other people, but
I mean, I've had fun with everyone I've ever worked with, because if it's not fun, I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think the sacrifices that we all make to be musicians, it's not an easy gig, and we sacrifice traditional family, traditional lifestyle, friends, country even, to do what we want to do. And if it's not something which warrants all of those sacrifices, you're going to walk and make a change very quickly. And I've never been afraid of doing that. So I have always had fun with projects. I've been with projects I've not had fun with. I've very quickly decided to make a left turn and move on.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as fun, I mean, I probably had the most fun was probably working with Steve Lukather and Greg Bissonette and Brett Tuggle, and we did a couple of tours. I worked on Luke's third album that was actually called Luke. I co-wrote about half of it, and then we toured that around the world. But it was just a never-ending fun trip. It's jokes.
I can imagine.
Very, very uncouth, but it was just terrific. Yeah, that was the most fun. But there again, I have a great time with the guys in Last in Line as well. We're primarily friends before anything else. It's a rolling comedy show. I mean, Vinny and Vivian and Andrew, everything is just a laugh a minute. We just have a great time, and we have the sense of humor enough that even if we have a bad night or something, we find something to laugh about within it. Find a funny side to it rather than sit there and have postmortems about stuff.
Yeah.
Johnny Halliday was extremely impressive to work with. I mean, there was another guy that had a tremendous history. I mean, this is the guy who was the French Elvis and who was the fourth biggest selling artist of music in the entire world.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you know who the number one selling artist is? It's not. It was Elvis and the Beatles came before him, but number one, you would never guess who it is. Well, you might. Throw it out there.
It's going to be some. Yeah, it's going to be some. The number one selling artist.
What's the most common language spoken in the world?
I would say
Spanish.
Yeah.
Julio Iglesias.
That was going to be my guess. What time frame we're talking to?
Yeah.
So anyway, but working with all of these people, I think was very impressive. John Waite, I loved working with John Waite. I was a huge fan. I still am a huge fan of his songwriting, of his voice, of his delivery, and he's another wonderful person. I would drop everything to go and do a gig with John at any moment in time. And so there have been some just terrific experiences.
Very cool. Very cool. You mentioned Last in Line. For anybody that's not familiar with Last in Line, it is the original Dio lineup.
Yeah. With
Vinny and Vivian, and obviously Andrew is a powerhouse, like just an amazing vocalist. And it was originally with Jimmy Bain, correct?
Yeah. Jimmy was the original bass player in that original Dio band.
Yeah, and then Jimmy had asked, and they asked you to come along, and I've seen you guys a number of times, and anybody that is just a fan of Dio or rock and roll music in general, go see Last in Line, because, like you said, your camaraderie on stage comes off as that on stage. You know what I mean? It's a bunch of guys that just are having fun together and celebrating some great music. But tell us some more about it. Like, how did that all come together?
Well, you pretty much nailed it. The key points is that this was the original Dio band, so it was the band that was responsible for the first 3 Dio albums, and that they had a way of working. They had a method by which they came up with those songs. And they were all participant in that. And the idea, I think, was born out of wanting to just, good time's sake, get together and go into a room and play. And they played some Dio songs, and they had fun doing it, did some shows. Yeah. And then they decided to kind of, okay, well, let's see if we can write some new stuff. But we'll keep the same writing method. And they came up with a first album, Heavy Crown, that was very well received. And they thought, well, you know what, maybe we should do this. Maybe we should stick to this. And then Jimmy passed away. I had been friends with Jimmy for a long time. When I first moved to LA, actually, I was actually living with him. I was living in his house. So we were friends. We were good friends. We met through Brian Robertson from Wild Horses and Thin Lizzy. And I'd been pals with Phil Lynott back in London as well. So there was all this kind of connection that was going on. And also Jimmy was bass player in Dio. I was bass player in Ozzy, and back then these were 2 sister bands, so we were each other's counterpart. So there was also a that kind of connection. When we started working again, I remember going to the first writing session to write a new record. And well, at first we had some shows to do, and I didn't really know if they were going to be just a fulfillment of obligation or whether it was going to be an ongoing thing. And I honestly don't think that the band knew either. They just said, look, let's just do these gigs and get them out the way. But there was evidently some chemistry that happened. I was trying to channel Jimmy as best as I possibly could, trying to, you know, channel my friend who passed away and pay tribute to him in that method. But we started to find that there was a chemistry. So when we went to write, I just said, well, Viv, I'm going to come in with some ideas. I've got some things, I'll put them down on tape. So and he said, no, because that's not how we used to do it. We used to do it just cold. Just come in with nothing. We'll just plug in. We'll see what happens. I said, okay, sounds good to me. So we came in, we started working that way. And I think because of that, the material that we come up with has that original Dio DNA, even though it doesn't sound like Dio. I mean, the new stuff we've written, the album 2 and the new album we're working on right now, doesn't sound like the old Dio songs, but it does definitely have that characteristic. So somebody said I got quiet or something?
Sorry, yeah, you got quiet. There we go. And yeah, kind of a loud whining sound that's going on.
I'm getting a whistling.
Whistling, perfect word for it.
Yeah,
yeah, I muted myself. When I did.
Do you want to mute and see if it's coming from me? Let's see if it
goes. Yeah, it's gone now. Try.
You know what I'll do is turn down a little bit here. My volume. There you go. I can hear you. Is that better?
No, it's still there, right?
Still there. Yeah.
Whistling?
It sounds. It's like a high pitched. Yeah, it's still there. It's like a high pitched squeal, almost like feedback.
You want me to put some headphones on?
Try that, yeah.
I'll try that. Hold on.
All right.
Mute that in the meantime. Oh, I can't.
Can you hear me all right, Dom?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and you're plenty loud too. That's kind of weird that it would start doing that all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Look at this. The last in line.
That's cool.
Nice.
Of course. All mod cones, my friend. Okay, let's see if that works. Whoa, it's
I don't think it changed anything.
No.
In your settings.
What the hell is going on?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay. This isn't working. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, no.
Very strange. What the hell? This is...
Yeah. I was gonna say, Phil, do you
Okay, we back?
No, you're still there. You're still feeding. Do you want to try just signing out and signing back in?
Yeah,
See,
let's do that.
try that.
Cool. We'll be here.
Oh, somebody's saying it's me. It cuts out every time I talk. But is it still cutting out when I talk?
It's totally gone now. I think when you were talking, it was just like kind of pushing out and compressing his audio.
Yeah, it could be.
So here we are. This is the point on stage where, like, you know, the guitarist is tuning and we're like,
bass solo.
do you have a joke?
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, good thing us bass players are so technical. Oh, what's this button do?
Amazing.
And Haji's saying we're fine on YouTube. So, well,
yeah.
Phil will be joining us momentarily here.
Somebody said 18K. Yeah, I feel like it sounded just slightly lower, but I think it's
18K, 19K, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Tube replacement. Oh, this is awesome.
So, not that I'm giving any real information here, but there's some low rumbling going on downstairs that people are going to be really excited about here soon.
Really?
Yeah.
You know, it's killing me that I can't be there.
I just want to take the laptop out there right now.
You can't do it.
Can't do it.
Oh boy, I hope we didn't like completely lose Phil.
think we're supposed to be prepared for this kind of thing, but clearly.
Well, I mean, we're 45 minutes into it.
Yeah.
When it started whistling like that. So actually, you know, it's funny. Paul had mentioned here on YouTube tube replacement. It actually sounded like a preamp tube going bad.
Oh, there we go.
Oh,
yeah. Now it's gone.
I was actually backstage for a while. The whole while that you were, I came straight on, but
you hit the dolly bar, didn't you?
What? No, I didn't do anything. I was just looking at your private chat there.
We said it was your tubes when you got busted.
Your tubes were going bad.
Yeah. Is this any better?
Yeah. Better. Yep. Way better.
So where were we? Last in line. So anyway, we basically just to pick up, we started working that way, and it got to the point where we play less and less DL material. We play mainly our original material when we go out there. And when we played the Download Festival year before last, which was a big show for us, it was the biggest show we did. We made a decision backstage, and we said, why don't we do this whole show with no DL material whatsoever? They're entitled to play some of those early DL songs. They wrote them.
Yeah.
And there's a few songs, if we don't pay them, we're going to get in trouble. So we do usually play 4 or 5 DL songs.
Okay.
But this particular show, we did all original material. People loved it. So that was great.
There you go.
It's really cool.
Yeah. And
shows on the books, like post-COVID, do you have anything that you feel like could still potentially happen?
For Last in Line?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're working on a new record. Half of it's recorded. You know, being able to do it this way, by some stroke of luck, last January we went into a studio in LA, into the Steakhouse, and we said, you know what, let's just bang some tracks down just for fun. We thought we'd bang a couple of tracks down. We actually recorded 6 tracks. It turned out to be a really good thing. So we've been able to work on those 6 tracks, and those have become half of the record. And we've been working in our own studios. I have my own studio here, as does everybody else. And it's nice. You get to spend the time getting the sounds that you want. You know, I work with a combination of DI and cabinets, amplifiers, as most people do. And so I can mic up an amp, and I can record it, and I can have a DI here, and I can mess around, and I can really spend time. So many times bass players get into a studio and to record something, and they spend hours and hours doing the drums, and then they turn around to bass and they go, plug in this DI. Yeah, that's cool. And that's usually how long it takes, right?
Yeah.
You don't get the chance to really spend some time to dial in the sound that you want. And this has been a nice part about it. I dare say that if I was a studio owner, I'd be really worried right now, because as people have gotten used to being able to work within a very cost-effective way in their own studios, you know, that might be a preferable way going forward. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you think?
I think drums though are still not that. I still feel like house setups don't allow for like that drum sound, that like super polished, super, like you're saying, like you spend hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
Drum sound right in big studios. But I think you're absolutely right about just people now are acquiring the skills and have the time to, people that may not have ever done this on their own before can now do this.
Yeah. I was just, you know, will that vibe of ever being, you know, in a professional recording studio in a great sounding room, you know, will that ever be replaced by a home recording environment? I think I'm kind of mentioning what Dawn was saying too. You know, it's like almost like going from a solid state amp to a tube amp. You know, can it ever be replaced per se?
You know, when the whole recording process has gone through different periods, different methods. There was the time in the 80s where we spent hours and hours and hours trying to separate every sound, gating everything, making sure that not one single microphone picked up the sound of another. And it'd take hours and days to do this. And then we'd spend hours and days trying to put it all back together again to make it sound like it was recorded in the same room, which I always thought was kind of futile, you know. But there is a lot to be said for going in there and dialing in a sound certainly for drums, incorporating the sound of that room if it's a great sounding room, and recording that and having that as a traditional sound. You look at most mixed albums, I think there's very, very few albums now that don't use some form of sound reinforcement or sample reinforcement when it comes to drums and what have you. So I wonder how much of this is that important. People like to dial in reverbs. They like to, I mean, I know when I'm producing, I like to get a snare sound. I like to get a reverb, and then I like to shape the reverb. I use gates to do it, and I use compression to do it, and I time the reverb so that it makes sense to the track. And so it's less important to me. I mean, I can use a synthetic reverb as a source to start with, and just here's some reverb, and now I'm going to shape that however I want it to sound sonically and whatever. So, you know, there's definitely a case to be made that you can do an awful lot in a smaller home studio type environment, but there is something very, very nice about sitting in a room surrounded by everybody and recording in real time together. Maybe it's more about the recording in real time. That's really where the excitement comes.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. Yeah. Eugene had actually asked, Phil, what are some of I got to put my glasses on here. What are some of the gear that you use in the studio and live? So
yeah, so you know, I mean, I'm very much a horses for courses kind of guy. So it's not that I have one particular setup that I always go to. I'll always try to find something that sounds good and then go from there. So the first thing I'll do is pick a bass, you know, and depending on what I want to record, how I want it to sound. I will tell you, I mean, I have some very elaborate instruments, and I'm endorsed by Music Man. I use the Stingrays and the Sterlings. I like the Sterlings, which I probably use more because they have more of a contour body, more of a jazz bass to like a precision type of thing. However, sometimes I record with precisions. You know, I want a passive bass, and that's what it calls for. So that's where I'll start, and then I'll listen to amplifiers, and I'll start playing around with amps. And I really, really like that little, I can never remember what it's called, that little amp that you gave me, the 20 watt.
Oh, the
head.
20.
Yeah.
I like that because it's like a little SVT.
Yeah.
And I put that through a cabinet. It's only 20 watts. I can put it in the back, and I can crank it up, and I can get it to saturate just where I want it to, shape the tone a little bit. And that's my starting sound. And now I'm going to listen to that in the studio, see how it sits with the track, and then see what it needs from there. The DI is something that's always going to go in there. And DI wise, I'll go through, I have a 7th circle DI, and I have a 7th circle API, which I use. I also have a Neve 70, but the API tends to sound best for bass. So I'll go into that, and I'll use that as my DI. It'll go through an 1176, and I'll just take a little bit off just on going in. Just a little tiny bit, no more than 3-4 dB. I know that the meters on 1176s don't mean diddly, but you can see it when it's just starting to have a little bit of a effect. You just use your ears. And then I don't want to do anything more from that point onwards. I want to leave it for the mix. So I don't want to add any more compression. I don't want to. And then when it comes down to the mix, sometimes I may even reamp that DI and use one of the Ampeg plugins. That's been great. Sometimes I'll use, going into the amp, I may use a gain affecting pedal, a distortion pedal, or whatever. Billy Sheehan's kindly gave me one of his pedals, and I really like it a lot, so I've been using that a lot.
Nice.
These things, what are they? This is one of his pedals, but I like the purple one. Yep. And sometimes I'll use that just to drive the front end of the amp a little bit more, just to give me a little bit more grit. That's really most of what I do. That's what I do. One thing I miss most is I find very, very difficult is any kind of modulation effects on bass. I've always had a problem with, I love the sound of chorus on a bass. I love the sound of, so we've used harmonizers, we've used this, the best thing in the world, hands down, was the Dimension D, because it was the only thing that never took the low end out.
Yep.
And so I find that's very challenging, trying to, when you're mixing bass, trying to get, if I'm using a fretless, for example, and I want to get that beautiful singing tone,
Yeah.
It's challenging because when you put a chorus in, you get a phase cancellation from the low frequencies, and you lose out on the punch.
Yeah.
So the only way to do it is to basically filter off that and then process that separately, and then have the low end go direct through. And we did a really nice track called the acoustic version of Landslide that we did with Last in Line, and we put it out as a video. If somebody wants to go hear it, they can hear it. And I've got a pretty decent bass sound on that for a modulated fretless sound. It's pretty cool.
Huh.
Yeah,
I'll have to check that out. And you actually just had a couple of releases. Actually, new release this past month in February, and then another single back in November, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I did it. I've had a couple of solo albums out, and those solo albums were showcases for my much more personal songwriting, which is much more commercial. It's traditional commercial songs. I mean, if you think about it, Shot in the Dark was a commercial traditional song. I mean, that's why the formula seemed to work very well. But a lot of that stuff that's been on those records has found its way into film and TV and movies even. And that's great. I love doing those. During the pandemic, I just said, well, what's the point of putting an album out? Why not put song by song out?
Yeah.
So I wrote songs, and the first song that I'd written, I had this title, Please Don't Make Me Wait. And I was thinking, well, I'm going to try to write this about, and I don't know what. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me, I went, wait a second, this is exactly what's going on. Please don't make me wait with this pandemic. So I wrote the song about being, not being able to play live.
Yeah.
And I reached out to fans and said, hey, do me a favor, go out, find your favorite music venue in a state of being shut down, take a picture of it and send it back to me. I'll incorporate it into the video. I can't tell you what it's about right now, but please send it to me. Yeah. And so the video was made of all of these little vignettes of places all over the world shut down. Yeah. And people love the song. They one radio station here in Vegas even said to me, this should be the anthem for music being shut down. Right. So I thought that was kind of nice.
Yeah. No. Did you do the video on your own, or did you work with? Okay. All right. I tell you that when you watch the video and then, like you say, you're listening to the song while you're watching the video, and you totally get the whole vibe of, don't make all these beautiful venues around the world that just aren't open because obviously what we're going through. So
exactly right. And my dear friend Richie Carson played the solo on that song.
That's right.
And Richie's very much, we're very similar in that respect. Like, he'll do a song and he'll create a video for it, and he's a multi-instrumentalist, as of course and so am I, and so we kind of relate to the same things. But I called him up and said, hey, do you want to play a solo on this? And he went, sure, yeah, send it over. He said, send it over. Great solo. So that. Yeah.
Hey, so you also have when you were talking about recording process and whatnot, I don't know if you've addressed this or not, but you have a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
That you address a lot of things on your YouTube channel, mostly like playing parts to certain songs that you've recorded. Do you do anything on your YouTube channel about maybe, tips and tricks on getting sounds in the studio or the recording process of, there's a lot of people out there that are just kind of getting into building their own personal little production studio, having instruction from somebody like yourself that knows what they're doing in the studio, I think would be invaluable as well.
Yeah, I put it all on hold temporarily because I was going to start to do something with another company, with a guitar company, and it sort of hasn't really materialized as of yet. Doesn't mean to say I'm not going to do it, but I'm actually thinking it wouldn't hurt for me to go and create some more content and put it up on the YouTube channel regardless. And the things that are really popular, of course, is how did I play this song? For a couple of the Aussie tracks. Mm-hmm. And it's great. I have to deal with a bunch of BS every time I post something up there because YouTube contacts me and then says, we've taken your track down because it's using copyrighted material. And it's like, I have to write them a note. No, that was actually me playing on this. This is purely educational. And they lift it. But you still have to go through the process. But those things have been very popular, Dino. I mean, people they want to know how you played stuff. The other things that are popular are the actual technique, improvements to people's techniques, or ways to play around. There's a wealth of stuff I could put up there, and I would like to as well. I enjoy doing those things.
Yeah.
I like teaching, and I like teaching because it forces me to analyze what I'm doing myself.
Yeah, of course.
Funny you mentioned Aussie stuff. I thought I'd crack this out for you because this hasn't seen the light of day in a while. But this was the original shot in the dark video bass, or the bass I used on most of the Ultimate Sin tour.
Okay.
And it's, as you can see, this is like old purple glitter. There's a story to it as well, but this is definitely like Break Wind and Fire. I mean, it's like. But this was a fantastic. Actually, it is a fantastic guitar. It's built by Roger Giffen.
Okay.
Who was a master luthier in Britain, and who ended up running the Gibson custom shop for 20 years. And it was all uniquely designed how I wanted it. It's got my initials on it, and just this purple metal flake finish.
Yeah,
I love it.
If you want to find out that, you're gonna have to read my book, because that's the whole Ozzy story about it. Because it was not the original color, but Ozzy had a problem with the color.
Oh, nice.
He said there's no way that I was going to take that bass on a stage with him with that color. And he said, you have to paint it another color. And I said to him, well, what color should I paint it? He goes, I don't care. It was like a very, very, very pale 1957 Fleetwood Cadillac pink with black hardware. It looked amazing. But he didn't like that. So he said, you have to paint another color. And I said, what color should I paint it? And he goes, I don't care any color except pink. And I said, well, you know what? You're going to pay for it. I'm not paying for it. So if you're paying for it, you pick the color. He said, fine. Purple with sparkles. And it was purple with sparkles. I think there it is.
You do an amazing Ozzy impersonation, Phil.
After I left, years after I left, I called Roger and said, Roger, I think we should redo this guitar, and we should really redo it and bring it back to its former glory, and then maybe get a different color on it and stuff. And he said, no, you can't do that. He said, because now you've got all of that history built into it.
Right.
So I finally defeated Neil. So
but you're right. I mean, everybody recognizes that bass from now. Did you record with that bass as well, or was it just on the tour?
No, I used this on the tour. I recorded, what did I use? I think it was a Yamaha BB3000 that was on the album.
Okay.
So it was a passive bass once again. So very often passive basses work well, but this bass is amazing. It has a little switch in here, right there.
Okay.
And that switches between active and passive. So you could do both.
Okay.
So this used the Bartolini system in here. And when it was passive, all I had was a volume and a tone, or two volumes and a tone, a passive tone. And then when you switch to active, then these become total control systems. You've got low, mid, high.
Yep.
When they're at zero, there's no sound. So they are total control EQ. And then you can actually shape a sound that you wanted out of it. So it's really got the best of both worlds. And it does sound fantastic. I haven't played it in a while, but I have recorded with it. It's a really great instrument. It's beautifully, it's got dings and it's got battle scars on it, but it's really a beautifully made instrument.
Yeah.
Roger is fantastic. I mean, he would make replacement necks for Jeff Beck and Eric Clapton and all of these nameless guitar players, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, he was fantastic. So
that's very cool.
It's got some weight to it. I don't like super light basses. I like feeling like there's something substantial on it. So does it feel pretty beefy?
Yeah, I mean, basses, yeah, it's definitely. I mean, this is probably about 12. Yeah, it's the opposite for guitar players, isn't it? Like I have some Les Pauls, some reissue Les Pauls that I'm proud to say are only 8.5 pounds. And the lighter they are, that seems to be more desirable, you know, with guitars, right? So bass players, it's like the heavier the better. It's, like this. You know.
Exactly.
I was going to say, I've got an Alembic over here that's about the weight of a black hole. So
you do have an Alembic?
I do. Yeah.
You lucky. I love those. Yeah. I almost bought an alembic.
Oh,
Series 2.
So it's an Elan. It's just got Elan electronics, so it's pretty much just like a passive active jazz.
Beautiful.
Bass. So yeah, I've had this. This was my bass when I was a student at MI. This was like, wow. And then I did a lot of gigs on this bass, and but then you things change. You like you say, you run into artists that you got an old P bass that sounds good, that sort of thing, and they don't want to see an active. They don't want to see a coffee table. They want to see an old P bass or an old jazz bass. And,
yeah, but sometimes it's very easy. I usually take 3 basses into a studio. I'll take in a P bass. I'll take in my Music Man. I'll take in another bass. It might be I happen to have a Fernandez 5-string, which was one of the nicer 5-string basses around. I used that for a long, long time. All the time when I was working with John Waite, I used Fernandez. When I was working with Johnny Halliday, I used Fernandez as well. And they made a really nice 5-string bass. So I would take those in, and then basically I just plug them in really quickly, and very quickly which one's going to work for the track. Straight away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without any, preconceptions or anything like that.
Yep. The sound's instantly there.
Yeah.
You have a couple of. Can I point some basses that I know you have in your collection that are just absolutely fantastic?
Yeah.
You have a couple of beautiful original walls too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I do. I have a oh my gosh, I have a what are they? There are the early 1980s. One was actually built for me by Ian Waller when he was alive. He passed away in 85.
Okay.
Tragic. Very great guy, but died way too young. And then Pete Fishman took over the rest of the running of the company until his passing, which was just a few years ago.
Okay.
And the company still continued. But the story is great. I've got this wall that was made, and it has a serial number or whatever. And he gave me, he said, I'm going to make you a fretted and a fretless neck for this bass. And the system is that in the neck, there are brass inserts.
Okay.
The idea that you can change the neck out without having to reset the bass up. And it does work. It absolutely does work. I've done that. 5 minutes, change the neck.
Huh.
But I was always looking for a body to put that neck on. And I looked and looked. And then one day I found a wall with the help of my brother. He found it in London that somebody was selling. And they'd taken a fretted wall and they'd ripped all the frets out and tried to fill in the gap. And they'd done a pretty nasty job of it. But the body was fine.
Okay.
And so I said, great. So I bought that, and it wasn't cheap. It was thousands, but I managed to buy it anyway. And then when I got it back, it was hysterical. The serial numbers are about 20 apart.
No way.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, so they were actually built right about the same time. So I put these 2 basses, and they're very, very close.
Wow.
I wish I'd known. I'd have brought them out the storage and stuff and displayed them. But they are fantastic. And wall was the English answer to alembic, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
And so many people use them, not just your English bands, your McCartneys, but Mick Karn made them quite famous from Japan.
Yep.
There was who else used them? Guys, Simple Minds.
Yeah, Simple Minds. Geddy Lee was using one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Power Windows, I think, was all wall, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's got a very unique sound. And today, the guy in Tool uses one.
I was just going to say, yeah.
That sound there's no sound like it.
Yeah. It's, and now they just, if you find an original wall, they just command such a high dollar. There are guys selling them, but they're very expensive.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cost prohibitive. I thought at one point, well, maybe I'll buy another one or two. And I started looking around and went, nope, maybe not.
Yeah.
No.
Cool. Very cool. So you've got a book coming out.
Yep.
Do you have any idea when that's coming out? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people here that would love to.
Yeah, I'm doing rewrites, rereads. When you write the book, it's a really weird thing. It's a very if I could share this with you, it's a very intense process. And what I mean by that is I have gone back to read sections and I've asked myself, how on earth do I remember that? Because I can't remember it anymore. And the reason is that because what happens is that you kind of store all the stuff in RAM in your head. And it's almost like once you've committed it down, you can clear it out. And so it's a very cleansing sort of process. And then you have to go back and reread it and reread it and reread it. A, to make sure you haven't left anything out. B, to make sure there's nothing that you want to make sure that you are telling your story, not other people's story. You obviously want to be very respectful to everybody. And you just kind of honing it and getting it into shape. And it's never going to be finished. And so I think you get to a point where you probably have to just abandon it and say, okay, that's good enough, that's done. And at that point, I will put it out. I'll put it out probably through myself, and probably not through a book deal. I just don't think book deals make very much sense. I talk to other bass players too. I talk a lot to Dave Ellefson. Dave's great with books and stuff. He puts a lot of stuff out. Okay. And as did Rudy Sarzo, Rudy put his book out as well. So I talked to both of them about it. Just seems to be that putting it out directly makes more sense.
Yeah.
So hopefully soon. It's a really good book, and I mean by good book I mean it's not like I did this, I did that, I did that.
Yeah,
no
of course.
I'm trying to sort of describe what things were like where I was going through those periods to make it much more interesting. Okay. And there's definitely some humor in it as well. There's lots of humor, some funny stories, but it's an interesting thing. Some people say, "You're going to write a second book?" And I don't know. This one took 4 years. So,
well, you have a title?
Huh?
You have a title yet?
I do, but I'm not going to share it just yet. Is that all right?
That's fine. That's totally fine. So, Phil, if anybody wants to follow you or get in touch with you, how can they go about doing that? Obviously, the YouTube channel, any other?
Please, absolutely. The YouTube channel is great. It's really a great place to put all kinds of useful information, and I put my singles up there as well and songs. I'm going to be doing more singles as well, so there's more material to come. Our Facebook page, myself, and of course Last in Line's Facebook pages are great.
Yeah.
And my Instagram, which is @PhilSoussan. Those are the best ways to follow me. That's it.
Excellent. And if you ever need advice on fixing refrigerators, follow Phil's page as well, because you are many talents.
We talked about this the other day, didn't we, Dino? But there's like things that there are some people in the world that look at something going wrong and they look at it as a challenge and go, that'd be fun. I'd see if I can fix it. My grandpa was my mom's dad was a watchmaker. He was a horologist, and he was a real watchmaker. I mean, if he needed a part, he'd make the part. This is, back in the day. And I have always had a respect for people like that. And he would teach me and say, if somebody built something, if a human being made something, another human being can fix it or can make it better. And so he kind of went through with that philosophy. And I applied that to fixing motorcycles, fixing everything. I mean, we're probably very much the same with the bikes and stuff. We like tinkering with bikes and making things. And, even electronics, I build a lot of my own equipment sometimes, preamps and what have you.
My philosophy has always been, it's broke already, so I can't break it anymore. And fix it, But no, I mean, seriously, if it wasn't for people that figured, that worked on solutions towards things, we wouldn't have all these great toys that we play with today. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, let's see how I can make this better or fix it, and I just thought that was that was like, and the backstory to this was obviously my refrigerator died and I was watching Phil's YouTube channel, and you actually have a great lesson on there, a John Paul Jones lesson that I actually didn't know, playing some of the octave stuff that John Paul Jones played on some of the early Zeppelin stuff that you demonstrated. But for some reason, I caught this refrigerator video on your YouTube channel. I was like, I want to see what this is all about. It was literally Phil fixing his refrigerator because of this one little, $10 part that was broken. And again, it's just like you and I, we see something. It's like, there's got to be a better way than throwing an entire refrigerator out or paying somebody an absurd amount of money to replace this huge component when it's just this one little $10 part that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
And if you fix it, you fix it. And if you don't, it's broken anyways.
There's very few people in the world that would come out and want to fix something for you and charge you $20 to fix it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
but, and in this day and age, people are concerned about throwing refrigerators away, and they're not very good for the environment and everything else. So why not fix it?
there you go. You can't break it anymore.
You can try it.
That's my motto for 2021. You can't break it anymore.
Yeah.
Anyways, Phil, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an absolute joy talking with you.
Thank you very much. It's really been my pleasure and my honor as well. And I know this is all about Ampeg, and it's all about SVTs, and it's all about these incredible amps that have been built since when, 1969.
Yeah. Well, the Ampeg's been 1949, but the SVT is 1969. Yeah.
I will share something interesting actually with you. When I was doing Lukather's album, we were working at the Steakhouse, and I ended up going through not an Ampeg bass amp, but an Ampeg guitar amp.
Okay.
And the bass sounds on that album are really unique. So we went with the DI, and we also went through an Ampeg guitar amp, distorted it and recorded that, and mixed the two things together. So I was able to, continue using Ampeg through that process. That was kind of cool, right?
Oh yeah.
Well, I know Luke talked about in his book, he had talked about his first like setup was an Ampeg amp, and I think it was a Les Paul that him and his dad had purchased when he was a young kid. And when I read that about him buying an Ampeg, I reached out to him via his Facebook, just kind of introducing myself and saying, thank you. And obviously I'd never heard back from him. He's probably saying, who's this weirdo that's reaching out to me about Ampeg guitar amplifiers? But I was just wondering if it was that amplifier that you may have recorded on, his guitar amplifier.
Oh, I don't know. It's one that's at the Steakhouse, and Steve had a financial interest in the Steakhouse, and I helped as well put that studio together because I helped with all their Pro Tools stuff.
Okay.
And so we tend to record there. That's where we just recorded those Last in Line tracks, was at the Steakhouse.
Oh, okay.
It's a great studio. It's got a great board in there, a great old Neve board.
Yep.
And it's actually old EMI Neve board from, I think it's from Abbey Road, but they only made 7 EMI adapted Neve boards.
Okay.
But they're completely anal. I mean, they've got Jensen transformers on all the meters and stuff. It's just like whacked out. Like,
Wow.
they were like rocket scientists over there at EMI back in the day. They all wore white coats and what have you.
Right.
If you read one of my favorite books recently has been the Jeff Emmerich book, the Beatles book. He was the engineer on all of those sessions. You know that, right?
Yeah.
So, he wrote, it's called Here, There, and Everywhere. And he talks about, how this band would come in and there were these people in lab coats and technicians and stuff.
Wow. Like NASA.
Yeah.
Workers.
Yeah.
That's how they treated it.
Very unique, a very odd experience. So
Jeff passed away 2 years ago.
Yes, he did. Yeah, he used to go to all of the PE wing Grammy events, and I got to know him pretty well. He was also very good friends with Bill Smith, the engineer. Bill worked on our Luke album,
okay.
And Bill also worked a lot with Al Schmitt. He was Al Schmitt's second for a long time. So Bill is a very accomplished engineer himself, and he was very close with Jeff. And Jeff sadly passed away. Great guy.
Yeah.
Great stories.
Yeah. But I'm glad, I'm assuming he passed obviously through the book, but he passed a lot of that knowledge on to yourself and through his career. I'm hoping he passed some of that tribal knowledge that only Jeff Emmerich would have.
Well, there was a lot of experimental stuff. I mean, honestly, nobody had done it before.
Yeah.
And so what I'd recommend somebody do is get that book and then get your Beatles albums and stick them side by side and go through the Beatles albums as you're reading the book, because you can hear some of the things that he's talking about. They had regulations at the BBC you could not have a microphone closer than a certain distance because you had to protect the protect the microphone or something. And when no one was looking, they were like, well, what happens if we put it closer? I mean, is the world going to end?
Yeah.
Closer, and then they would be too loud, so then they'd hit a compressor or a limiter to compensate and bring it down. And there you got that sound of overdriving a limiter and having close miking techniques that we use all the time. I mean, so they came up with these ideas. The ideas of taking microphones and over compressing them to get like a room sound out of them to,
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So Here, There, and Everywhere is the book.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
It's a good book.
I'm looking for new material. So
yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, thank you, sir. This has been awesome. An hour and a half we've been chatting, and it feels like we just started like 10 minutes ago.
We could probably do another hour and a half, right?
Well, we'll have you back on at some point. Love to have you back on, and again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Dino. It's really a pleasure. And look forward to being able to see you guys soon, or being out on the road, or doing something very, very soon.
I was going to say, hopefully you guys, either I get out that way or you guys come out this way at some point. So
on the next one, I want to see your bike collection though too. We saw bases this episode. We want to see some more bikes,
some more motorcycles.
Motorcycles, yeah. I'm about to tear my Harley down. It's going to be rebuilt. I'm doing that starting this week, actually.
Oh man,
put that on YouTube.
I was going to say, put it on YouTube.
Yeah.
No, whole engine's coming down the crankshaft.
And you're going to do it all. You will do it all yourself too.
Oh yeah. That's it's a 2-day job for me. Yeah.
Awesome.
I wrenched on motorcycles. I took it after I worked with Vince Neil. I decided I wanted a break, and I went for 6-7 months. I went to work for a guy who restored Italian motorcycles, and we tear bikes down and rebuild them all the time. And I love doing that.
Yeah, I learned through Tim Boger.
Yeah.
I learned more about motorcycle repair than I did actually from his bass playing. So, yeah. Well, all right, gentlemen.
Okay.
Right, thank you, Phil. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Take care.